Hey guys, Brendan here, and Fridays are usually for Fact Fridays, but unfortunately they've been doing work outside for the past 3 days, and it's loud and it's obnoxious, so being able to record anything out there where there's no echo is kind of difficult, so I decided we're going to go revisit the tier list idea that we did not long ago. This time around, I wanted to focus on common pet reptiles, not just geckos, not just snakes, just like reptiles that are commonly kept in the reptile hobby. So we're not gonna be having any like the oddball, like weird stuff. These are just ones that like you will probably see at some point in your life. So I thought that'd be fun. So without any further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so I made this little tier list here. I just kind of went online, just thought about ones I've seen personally, and made a tiny little list of just the most common reptiles that I tend to see. So some of these may be less common or more common in your area, depending on where you live, but for me, living in Arizona in the US, these are the most common ones that I see all the time. So first off, we got an Aki Monitor. Now, Aki Monitors are probably one of the least common ones on this list, just because you may not see these all the time, but if you're going to see a monitor lizard, I feel like these are going to be the most common one you do see, just because they're the easiest to care for out of the popular ones. I really do like Aki Monitors. I feel like they're probably one of the best monitor species there is. They're tiny. They're intelligent. I would go ahead and put an Aki, however, in C tier, just because Akis are still monitors, which means they eat a lot. They're not an easy beginner lizard. I'd probably put them at the intermediate. I wouldn't call them an expert. I mean, if you're somebody who's been keeping reptiles for a while, you should handle an Aki no problem. But for a beginner, I wouldn't suggest them. Next is one that I definitely would not recommend for a beginner, but I love them, and if I ever had the space for one, I'd absolutely get it. This is an Argentine black-white tegu. I could just put like tegus in general here, but they're so diverse that I would have to like, you can't do that, because like certain species are more aggressive, or not really aggressive, but more defensive. Some are more like, angry, some are more just pain in the butts. But Argentine's team seem to be the best. See, I'd have to, and I just said that, but as far as being good as a pet, I'd put them in C tier for different reasons. Now, Aki go in C tier because Akis are monitors, and monitors eat a lot, and that can be a pain in the butt. Now, Argentine black and white tegus go into C tier because, while they're not the hardest thing on the planet to feed, they are a pain in the butt to house. And if you have to take up like a whole corner of a room, actually probably like an entire room nearly, to house a animal, then that animal is going to lose points, unfortunately. Now next up is a ball python. This is the jack-o'-lantern piebald python that I saw on online. I was like, I'm going to use that picture for the tier list. I made the tier list, by the way. If you guys want to do this yourself, you can do it below in the link. Ball pythons. Yeah, ball pythons are excellent. I mean, I would put them in A tier. No, S tier. Definitely S tier, because they're one of the better, like, tame, calm snakes. Generally, every snake's different. I mean, there are people who, like, have angry ball pythons, but it's just so uncommon. Yeah, I like ball pythons. Definitely going to put that in S tier. Not going to spoil anything, but you guys can expect more ball python content soon. Alright, so next is the bearded dragon. Now, bearded dragons, this might be controversial of me to say, but I like them. They're not great beginner animals, and a lot of people like to put them on beginner lists, but here's the thing. They don't have, as bad of a problem with this as the Aki Monitor, but they do eat a lot of food. So the problem with bearded dragons is that although they're like probably the most handleable, personable lizards on the planet, they eat a lot when they're babies, and then their poop stinks. They need a decent sized enclosure because they're big lizards. Like, there's more to them than just sticking them in a box and saying, I have a lizard now. And I think a lot of pet stores really do these lizards injustice because they give people the bare minimum advice, and I could probably go on a whole rant about why I don't like chain pet stores. But yeah, bearded dragons are great, and I would love to have one day, but they're definitely not as great as everybody else hypes them up to be. Sorry. Next is blue-tongue skinks. Now, blue-tongue skinks are pretty cool. And blue-tongue skinks, in my opinion, fall into the same category as a bearded dragon. They need a decent amount of space. I mean, I wouldn't say feeding them is a complete pain. It is and it isn't. And they're skinks. I love skinks. So B tier for blue tongues. They're not. There's the same thing with the bearded dragon. They're not extremely difficult. I just wouldn't recommend them to a beginner. And their humidity can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but anything that has humidity can be a pain in the butt, even like crested geckos. Next is corn snakes. Now, corn snakes I would also put in S tier, just because, like ball pythons, I mean, maybe I'd drop a ball python down to A tier because corn snakes are actually easier than a ball python to care for. They'll typically readily eat for you. I would say a ball python's easier to handle, but a corn snake is not like anything ridiculous. It's just a little more flighty, a little more active when you're holding them. So there's that. If you hate that, then there's that. Next would be the BCI, I think. Common boa? That BCI or BCC? I don't know. It's just boa. Common boa. I don't know my whole snake classification. I know they changed that. I would definitely say that a boa is not for everybody, but it's also a pretty cool snake. I'd put it in C tier. Now, it's not like Burmese python huge by any means, but it is a little bigger than your ball pythons. And for that reason alone, it's not for everybody. Not everybody can have a snake that gets bigger like that. And for that reason, I would put a Boa Constrictor in C tier. But other than that, they're not terrible snakes. Next is the Crested Gecko. Now, I love Crested Geckos. The only con that I can really tell, you can probably hear them doing work outside. 3 days straight, y'all. So, Crested Geckos are great, but they drop their tails, and that can be a con for a lot of people. So, I would definitely put a Crested Gecko into A tier, just because I can't put it in S tier knowing that it drops its tail. If that's a con that's big enough for me to not put it in S tier. Now, we did this similar thing in the Gecko tier list video. Gargoyle Geckos are S tier, because Gargoyle Geckos will grow their tail back. It won't be the same. Like in the picture here, you can kind of see its tail wrapping around the guy's finger. If it grows back, a grown back tail won't do that. But it was like more stiff. But it will at least grow back and look pretty similar. With Crested Geckos, once they lose their tail, it's gone. Also notice that gargoyles tend to be a little calmer. Crested Geckos are a little more jumpy all over the place, where gargoyles, once they get used to handling, are just kind of mellow. So for that, I like Gargoyle Geckos better. Maybe I'm biased because I have one, but whatever. I've been around Crested Geckos. It's not like I haven't seen Crested Geckos. Next is Garter Snakes. Now I like this picture I used because this is one of the prettiest Garter Snakes. Garter Snakes are cool, but they have their cons. They're not great for handling because they're super like just darty. And they're just nippy and But they're also relatively easy to keep, and they're one of the few snake species that you can cohabitate with other garter snakes, which I think is pretty cool. I would put them in B tier, just because there's not like a pain in the butt to keep. They're just not as like personable as say like a ball python. Next would be a hognose snake. Now I hate hognose snakes. D tier. No, I'm kidding. I love hognoses. They're one of my favorites. I would put them probably, though, realistically, I would probably put them in B tier. The cons of them is that they are mildly venomous, which makes them illegal in some places. But their venom, as I've said before, is like a bee sting, so who cares? But it's enough of a deal breaker. I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't, if you're living with somebody who doesn't like snakes, and then you tell them that you're getting a snake that's mildly venomous, they're really not going to like snakes, and they're really not going to like that snake. So B tier for hognose snakes, and that's saying something because, as I've said before, hognose snakes are probably my favorite snakes. But they're not for everybody. The mild venom and the fact that they're a little bit mean when they're young is something that turns people off from hognose snakes, but not a big deal. Next is leopard geckos, straight to S tier. I don't need to explain that. Leopard geckos are great. Made a whole video on it. You can watch it here. Red-eared sliders. Red-eared sliders are another one I want to talk about. Because when I was a kid, you could find red-eared sliders pretty much everywhere. And they had like ponds and like you'd go into a pet shop and there'd be like entire thing. Like there's a pet shop by my house and they had a pond in there and the entire pond was filled with red-eared sliders. It was like when I say pond, it was more so like a kiddie pool, but a very large kiddie pool. And they sold these, and every other day somebody would be walking out there for red-eared slider. Now, I live in a desert city in Arizona, and we have like 3 lakes. They're man-made lakes, obviously. But all 3 of those lakes are now infested with red-eared sliders because people would buy them when I was younger and let them go, and they would breed, and now all 3 of those lakes have red-eared sliders in Arizona, a desert. It's weird, but it's true. And that is why I have to say that as far as being a pet, they suck. Okay, not that harsh. They're great pets. The animal themselves, I'm a huge turtle guy. My first pet reptile actually was a red-eared slider. So I have a certain love for them. But they're probably one of the most misunderstood reptiles that there are. They're like, oh, you can just stick them in a 20-gallon tank. No, the heck you cannot. They need a lot of water, 75 to 100 minimum. I would actually put them in a kiddie pool instead of putting them in a tank. They need UVB, which a lot of people don't provide for turtles. They need basking areas. They need a place to sit and then water. So you're basically going to be maintaining a very large aquarium if you put them in a proper housing. They're not easy. And for that reason, I'll put them in C tier because they have the same kind of difficulties. Like they're the same level of just as some of these other species. Now, maybe a boa constrictor is not as difficult as like an Aki, a tegu, or like, maybe it is because I would say a boa would be as difficult as a red-eared slider. Red-eared sliders are not that difficult. You just have to know how to keep a large aquarium. And you have to be able to like provide UVB, which can get expensive. We got 2 more left. It's been kind of a long tier list video, but I liked giving explanations on the animals and like why I'm putting them where I'm putting them. Next would be the Kenyan Sanboa. Now, the Kenyan Sanboa is basically a pet container of dirt, sand, but they're also relatively easy to keep. They have like really no cons other than the fact you just might not see them for a while because they're like literally keeping a container of sand. That's it. That will occasionally stick his little head out and like eat a rodent, which is cool, I guess. I mean, if I wanted a Kenyan Sanboa, I could care for one, no problem. They're super easy. A tier, just based off the fact they're super easy and they're derpy looking. I mean, look up pictures of Kenyan Sanboas. I know this doesn't do it justice. They're the derpiest. I mean, any Sanboa, like Arabian, Kenyan, doesn't matter, but they're all super, super derpy. Last but not least, Sokata Tortoises, my dream reptile. I've said before that turtles are my favorite animals. Turtles and tortoises are my favorite animals. Sokatas are the largest turtles and tortoises, same. But Sokatas are the largest tortoise species that I could keep reasonably without breaking some sort of law. So, yeah, I love these guys. These guys are great. But they make crappy pets. And this whole list is kind of about, like, how did it do as a pet? Otherwise, if I was just going off favorites, hognose snakes would be an S tier. And then corn snakes would probably be down to, like, C tier. I don't really like corn snakes, but they do make great pets. Just based off being a pet alone, see, this is probably the most difficult out of all of them on the list. Because it's huge, it will cause property damage. They're sweethearts, but they bulldoze anything you put them in. You can't put them in a house. You have to have a yard. Argentine black and white tegus, you can get away with keeping them in a room. Boa constrictors, you can keep them in a room. Aki, everything else on this list, you can keep in a room. So Sokata tortoises, you cannot keep in a room. They need to be outdoors. Unless you have a reinforced walls and like made out of brick. Like I have brick walls, and even then I wouldn't keep a Sokata tortoise in my house because my doors would be broken. They wouldn't go through the wall, they'd go through my doors. So, God, this pains me. D tier. I'm sorry, Sokatas. Alright, so that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have an excellent day, night, wherever you guys are. And hopefully by next week they'll be done working on stuff and we can get back to doing Fact Fridays. Heck yeah. Bye guys.